Welcome to the Farming on Purpose podcast, a podcast for farmers and ranchers ready to shift for a stronger future. Today's challenges in agriculture are new, but the grit and determination required to be successful are not. On the Farming on Purpose podcast, you'll hear how producers of all sizes and practices are moving mountains for things they believe in, all in the name of an industry that keeps growing and innovating for a stronger food system and stronger farm families. I'm your host, Lexi Wright, and I'm excited to discuss where producers are finding success, challenging the status quo, striving for better, and keeping our heritage alive, all while producing the food we depend on. Hey there, it's Lexi, and I am sliding into this podcast episode with an opportunity for those who are interested in it. The last time that you sat down to plan your marketing, do you know when it was? Was it hard? Were you confused? Did you feel like you actually should be working on your business instead of trying to make social media posts or write emails or design ads? If that's you, I created a system to develop a full year's marketing strategy and a plan to implement it in 8 hours or less. Yes, really, 8 hours, one day. Sit down, plan all of your marketing for the entire year, and actually have the things in place so you can implement it, not just a really pretty outline on a calendar. So you'll walk away with a roadmap for your marketing activities for the next 12 months, confidence in knowing exactly what to do and when to do it, and more time to focus on actually running your business instead of worrying about your marketing. So if you are tired of just winging it or getting stressed out by trying to remember to do your marketing, check out this offer. You can find out when it's ready at farmingonpurpose.com/plan. farmingonpurpose.com/plan. I'd love to see you there. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us this week. This week, I have Laura Hicks as my guest. And Laura grew up on cattle ranches between southeast Montana and the sandhills of Nebraska, which is one of my favorite places to drive through. I think it's just so beautiful. She married her husband straight out of high school and started buying land and cattle in the best hard grass country of southwest South Dakota. They've enjoyed 31 years of marriage together. And her dad is a veterinarian. I think that's an important piece to include as we think about how your story unfolds. And I'm sure you'll talk about that more. And I love that you said this. You're grateful to still spend much of your time horseback at the south end of a north-facing cow. That's very well said. And then I want you to tell us more about all the things you have going on, what your journey's been like, and we will be sure to talk about your books before we wrap up today. So, Laura, tell us about how you got to where you're at and what you're doing now.
Well, like you said, my dad is a veterinarian, so I've grown up on a ranch in a veterinary office most of my life. I mean, actually, my dad was working at a feedlot when he was at Kansas State University going to vet school. And he also worked at a ranch job. So he worked 2 jobs plus went to vet school with there's 3 girls at that time. So he had a full plate. And then he would just pack us kids. He would take us at different ones with him on the ranch job and just pack us on a horse with him. So I've been on a horse actually since before I could walk. And it's my happy place. I love to be horseback. So I went through that, and my dad is a large animal vet predominantly. So growing up in the vet office a lot, we got to hang out and be a part of that. And then he leased a ranch up in southeastern Montana, a huge ranch. Like southeastern Montana, if you're familiar with it, it takes a lot of land to run cattle. It's just a little sparse up there. And so it was a big, big ranch. And we lived in a house that had no running water or electricity. There was 2 rooms and 7 of us lived there. No running water. We had an outhouse. We took a bath in the windmill tank, and we rode all day, every day. That's what we did.
Oh, wow.
From the time I was 5 is when that started. We just were pretty much horseback all the time. Dad would kick us loose, like me with one of my older sisters, and we would have to check fence and check cows. And so I spent a lot of my early years, like you said, on the south end of a north-facing cow. And at 51, I still feel extremely blessed that I get to do. I sometimes pinch myself. It's hard. Ranching isn't easy. It's not easy. And I don't want to give that impression. But to get to do what you love so much and are so passionate about it, even on the days it's 30 below and you're like, gosh, oh, why do I have to pee out here so bad every time I'm feeding cows when it's 30 below? But I'm so grateful that I get to do this that sometimes I have to pinch myself. So, and then Mike and I married right out of high school, and he was on his family's place, but they had lost it due to some circumstances. And we started buying it back when we got married. And so we started from scratch. We really didn't have a choice. We didn't have cattle or land, either one. And we just started from scratch. And we ran a lot of other people's cattle for several years. We took in take-in cattle and we calved for other people. And we busted our humps pretty hardcore. I mean, our bodies are feeling it at our age now because we did. We hustled hard for what we wanted, but we believed in what we wanted. So we went after it hard. But we started with running other people's cattle and then just building our herd slowly. It's taken a lot of years to get where we are right now. And it still sometimes surprises both of us that where we are. You know, we believed in the dream, but to get to this point is also really rewarding and also a little unbelievable.
Absolutely. That sounds, an incredible story. I'm trying to imagine a childhood like that. That sounds straight out of the books or the movies. To be off grid, that rural, and just doing it every day out there. That's pretty amazing. And I completely agree on having to pee when it's negative whatever with wind chill, and you're like, why do these bibs not have a flap or something?
Yep, exactly. I think the need is exponentially higher because you have all these buttons to get undone. So
why is it that way? But well, wow, it sounds like you've had a lot of really cool experiences in the industry. When you guys started off buying back your husband's family ground and taking in cattle, what was that experience like? Was there a lot of promise in the industry at that point, or were you told, don't do this, this is a bad idea?
No, we were thankfully, we did have a very supportive banker. We went through FSA to get started and then also worked with a banker. And the banker was very supportive. And he didn't really tell us no. He just said, I can't promise you this is going to work, and I'm only going to go in so deep with you, and you're going to have to work hard. And I know he believed in us was the great part. He really did. That we're so blessed to have a great bank still to this day that have pushed us. They have believed in us. The rest of the industry, we were young. I was 19, straight out of high school, just married. And it was kind of hard for a banker to take us on. And they did. And he just told us, like 15 years into it, he goes, just so you know, I want you to know this now. I didn't want to tell you this in the beginning. People don't make this work the way you're doing it. Buying cows and land at the same time doesn't work, but you're doing it. And I said, well, I'm glad you didn't tell me that on day one. I might have given up. And he said, that's why I didn't tell you. As he said, I believed in you enough that I just wanted to give you a chance. So it was really rewarding that he believed in us enough.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I'm trying to imagine 19-year-olds in today's economy taking that risk. And it's like basically unheard of. I'm sure there's somebody doing it, but what a cool opportunity then to also get to buy back your husband's family ground. Was that something that you had to sort through with family at the time as well, or?
No, they had lost the place completely. It went back to FSA. It was an auction. His mom had passed, extenuating circumstances I won't discuss on here about his dad. They were out of the picture. And so there was no family that way. His siblings were great and very supportive of us getting it. They wanted nothing to do with it. So they were great about supporting us. I still do. So that way we've been blessed. And it helps me now with adult sons to hopefully, because I've seen a lot of things go really bad with adult children coming into the landscape on that. And because we've had such support from our family, it helps me want to do better than I've seen other places do. I want to do right by our sons.
Yeah. Well, as you guys have grown over the years and shifted gears from that kind of crazy 19-year-old startup phase to where you're at now, what were some of the points along the way where maybe you felt like okay, now we're doing something right. Things are starting to be successful.
Right. Honestly, I believe success is a mindset. So for me, maybe it's because I just believed in the dream so much. Even when we only had 50 head of cows of our own, I believed it was a success. I did not ever think, in the ranching community, a lot of times people will, at least where we live, it's big cow numbers. And so when you only have 50 head of cows, people sometimes will say, well, you're just a peon in the ranch. I'm like, no, we're not. We're working just as hard as you to make this work. We had 50 head of longhorns. I just so want to explain that for her. People calve out longhorns and then talk to me about works. But I think I felt like a success from the very first day that we put our name on the note because we were brave enough to go do it. I think the biggest turnaround for us is when we were able to start keeping replacement heifers. That shifted the landscape completely on our ranch. It has changed everything for us because my dad's a veterinarian, he got into embryo transfer work in the early 80s. And so the way we kind of built our herd originally was, I would not recommend this. I'm telling you as a do not do this. My dad would buy open cows from the sale barn to use as recip cows, and we would run them. And then anything that didn't get an embryo, everything got an embryo. Anything that didn't settle with an embryo would get bull bred, and we would keep the bull breds. He would buy the recip cows. Well, you can imagine buying 300 head of open cows from a sale barn throughout the year, what they were like. A lot of them actually were already bred, but they sold them because they were just horrible temperaments. And so for several years, it was all you could do to have cows that didn't eat your horse all the time. It was pretty rough. When our kids were young, it was pretty rough. You had to watch the kids all the time when you're sorting and stuff because the cows were just flat mean. And now that we've kept replacement heifers for the last close to 10 years, our herd is totally different. It's just not even the same. I feel safe having my grandkids out there caking cows. I mean, I still have, respect for cattle. They're large animals with that 3-year-old, but it's a different kind of cow than we had back when Mike and I started.
That is a very unique startup story. I don't think I've heard that one before, but that's really cool. That issue you described right there is one I struggle with so much. As a mom, it's just, you want your kids to be involved. You want them to be out there with you learning, but the safety issue is hard to get past or figure out how to manage. What was that like for you with young kids out there with crazy cows?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. I'm not the best example because Mike and I were kind of on our own, and we do live very rural. I mean, we're a long ways from anybody. We didn't really have a lot of extra help when the boys were really little. So they just went a lot. They were with us a lot, either horseback on with me. And we had several wrecks. I was moving cows. Mike was trucking at the time. And so I was calving out cows with a 3 and a 1-year-old by myself. I would not recommend it. That was not good. We survived. Thank God they all survived. But, we were moving cows, the boys and I, in right before a blizzard one time. And I've got one on the saddle in a pack with me and one on his own horse over here at 3. And a cow turned for no reason and hit his horse right in the chest and knocked his horse almost to the ground. And thankfully, my dog hammered on the cow good enough to get her turned off of him. But, you think of all the little close mishaps. But it's one of those things. It was a necessity at the time. I didn't really have any other options. So you just do what you have to do. Yeah. And we grew up pretty tough. So both Mike and I. And so I think we kind of had that mindset that we survived. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I wouldn't recommend it to a lot of moms, but I also think that if you can get out with your kids, our kids have always had chores from the time they were pretty much old enough to walk. They have, in today's day and age, I don't want to sound prideful, I am really proud of our boys' work ethic. They have extremely good work ethic, and they're only 27 and 30, but they're driven individuals. They work hard. They play a little better than Mike and I. We've tried to instill that in them, but they're hard workers and I'm proud of them.
That's incredible. And I'm so grateful that you shared openly and honestly about what that was like. I think so many moms, whether you're on a farm or a ranch or whatever your role looks like, safety is something that all of us have to face when it comes to how we manage that situation for our kids. And like you said, it's not always a good option available depending on what your situation is, but you have to figure it out and get through it. So I appreciate you sharing honestly about that. It means a lot, I think, to hear other moms talk about it, that it's not like it's not just you who is continuously having to face these potentially dangerous situations with your kids. Like it's all of us, and it's something that we can kind of share some pride in that you do when you do get through it.
Well, and I've been scolded a time or two on social media, social media and the way they do that. And I've been scolded a time or two, sharing stories about my kids' childhood and that I should not have put them in that situation. And I can't help but think it, and I don't want to ever say it must be nice because I hate that phrase so much, but we didn't all have the same options, and every parent does the best they can. I think most, not all, but most parents do the absolute best they can. They don't want their child hurt. They're going to do the best they can by them.
Absolutely. Well, incredible experiences for your boys growing up as well, it sounds like. You said that you felt like you've always been successful from the day that you put your name on the note. I think that is such a cool mindset to have. And one that everybody in ag could benefit from, because it's an uphill battle and it takes so long to get to a point where you truly, feel like you have your ducks in a row. But there's a lot of great milestones along the way that you can celebrate. Were there any other points throughout that journey as you expanded and as you grew that you were like, this is where we're really starting to turn the corner here?
We diversified so much in the beginning. Like Mike was trucking, I was calving. And then we got into sheep and I run sheep as well. And so there was different points along the way that I'd say, okay, this is working and we need to continue on with this. Surprisingly, the sheep work really well. They help offset costs of other things. They're a lot of work. There's so much more work than cows. I can't even tell you, but it brings in a different, paycheck at a different time, right when you need it the most. And so for us, having checks come in at different times and not being so dependent on an operating note has helped us feel more independent. And that's a big thing for us because, starting out at 19 and having the banker tell you what you're going to do and not do felt a little bit like, you're controlled. And my husband is an extremely strong-willed, extremely dominant personality. And so for him, it was really a little bit of a struggle. And so when the banker, it's just an off story here on this, but he wanted to buy 50 head of, I don't even know why he wanted to do it, but 50 head of Hereford steers one time. He's like, I can make money on this. I know I can. And they said, nope, we're not doing it. And he said, I know I can. I believe I can. I will figure out the money myself and I will do it because I know. And I don't know why he thought he could. So he scraped up the money himself, figured out a way, bought them, doubled our money on those Hereford steers. Wow. I still don't remember how. It's been so long ago. But I just remember the story that, he believed in this so much that he was willing to risk things. Now, there's other things, he won't. When my dad sold his ranch, he offered it to me first or my brother and then I wanted it so bad. It's so close. And I just wanted it to add on. And Mike said, we cannot afford to lose this place to get that place. And that's what it would be. It'd be risky. The risk is too high. And so it was hard to say no, but it was the best thing to be able to not lose this. And it worked out anyway, because our youngest son ended up buying my dad's place. And so he lives, as the crow flies, it's only 12 miles, but it takes about an hour. And it's not a big place, but it's enough to run a bunch of our cows over there for the summer. So we run his cows for the winter, and then he runs some of our cows for the summer. And that's our ranching together with our younger son. And then he is a doctor in our little community. And which is so funny because he told me when he was a sophomore in high school, I get out of here, I'm never coming back to this lifestyle. And about a sophomore in college, he said, oh, I can't imagine any other way to raise my kids. So I got to come back. I got to figure out how.
That is incredible. I'm so glad that he had the opportunity to get your dad's place. That's pretty special. Well, that's really cool. I love those kind of just moments where it just feels like it's all meant to be and working out. Those are pretty incredible when you get those.
And they don't always happen. So it's nice to get hold of them when they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like your dad has had a lot of influence on you and the person that you have become. What were some of the things that you felt you really have picked up from him over the years, or big things that he showed you that have helped you find success?
Well, the funny thing about Dad and I is we're actually quite opposite. Dad is quiet. He thinks a lot, and if he speaks, it's really going to be something you want to listen to because that's the way he is. I tend to speak first and then think later, and so he's gotten on my case a little for that over the years. But I think the biggest thing for Dad is he's not scared to try. He's never been scared to try things. Sometimes he'll jump into things a little quick, and I'm the same way in that respect, but he's a pilot, he's a pastor, he's a veterinarian, he's a rancher, he's an author. He's not scared to, like when they were doing embryo transfer, he was the first one in South Dakota to start embryo transfer. And he had to jump out on a ledge and have faith in himself to do it. And I think he has really instilled both Mike and I, and then thus our children, that to just don't be scared to take a few risks. You got to try, there's risk and reward. You got to weigh it out, but don't let fear is Dad's biggest thing for us. Don't let fear keep you back.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good one. As you guys have grown and developed the ranch to what it is today, which I want to hear more about where you guys are at today and kind of what your practices are. But what points along the way did you have any shifts in your role, if you did, as you kind of have progressed and grown?
Sure. I've always been outside. I've always had to adapt, when the kids when I was pregnant and I didn't like being pregnant, it was really hard on me. So I wasn't outside quite as much then. But yeah, pretty much I've always been outside. I don't know that my roles have shifted a whole lot because I just figured out what works for me and what doesn't. And thankfully, Mike has been supportive. I'm not a bookkeeper. I don't do spreadsheets. So we hired that out as soon as possible, as soon as we could afford it, because I was doing it on paper for years and I hated it. I mean, I stressed to the point I thought I was going to throw up because I thought I was going to ruin our ranch over something I was not capable at. And so as soon as we could hire that out, and Mike knows that I like to be outside. So I feel trapped if I'm inside too long. And so we just I have to do a lot of the inside stuff by myself. Mike doesn't help with dishes or laundry or anything, which doesn't always feel fair. I'm going to be honest. But he's always been really good with the kids. He's always helped with the kids. Like if I needed a break to get caught up in the house when the kids were little, he would take them to the tractor. So that part's always been good. I've always been in the hayfield. I've always been working cattle. I mean, I don't know that anything has really ever shifted. As I keep thinking as I get older, it's probably going to, just because I've had so many broken bones that, I'm starting to hurt a little. But I just don't want to quit either, because once I quit, I'm afraid I won't get back up.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's really amazing. You've been able to, really do exactly what you want to do for as long, from day one and all the way up till right now. That's pretty special. Have you guys had to butt heads or figure things out management wise along the way, or what's that been like for you guys making management decisions?
When it was just Mike and I, it was actually easier. We're really on the same page. We're on after the same dream. So for us, that was quite easy. Sometimes because of his personality, he wants to take the lead and just my way or the highway. That's his motto. And so but I'm a little that way too. And so, there was a few times where, we had to hash it out a little more than I'd liked, but we did. But now with our oldest son lives just over the hill from us and works day to day, every day with us. And sometimes I've had to catch myself. Our pastor actually just called me out on this not too long ago. He said, you're getting in the middle of their arguments. And he said, you need to let them sort that out themselves. Men will sort it out different than if mom comes in to rest. Because what I do is I try to rescue our son all the time. Mike, you're being too hard on him. And then I actually cause more of a rift. So I'm trying to learn to just, in a business, it's so hard because with ranching, you're not just clock in and clock out. We all know that. And family, we work together, but we're still family, but you are your job. There's no boundaries of it. It all flows over everywhere. And so trying to separate the business that we're running together and the family has been really probably more challenging than anything I've done so far in ranching.
Yeah, I could imagine that being a really challenging step to take and trying to get over the mother's heart of protecting your son and whatever, in any scenario that's hard to do. What was that transition like when he started ranching with you guys? When did it start? Did it go progressively, or how did you guys manage that?
So when Dustin was in high school, he knew he wanted a ranch. He wanted to stay here, but we told him he had to leave for a couple years and go to a trade school or something. He had to get off the place to make sure, this is all he's ever known. He wanted to make sure he saw some of the world before he came back. He came back 2 years after college, or 2 years. He went to college and then came back and went to work for us immediately. He just started as a hired man, as what we did. We paid him a salary and he was here. And in the last 2 years or so, we've been transitioning. He's been building his cow herd. And so instead of us paying a wage, we're just now in January going to start to transition from that because he's running enough cows of his own now. And he's also going to purchase some land that we already have so that he can buy in. And so what our goal is long term, especially with Dustin, is that we will be partners on this home place here. And then our youngest son, we all run cows together, but it's different than with our older son, Dustin. Yeah.
That's really neat that you had kind of two separate opportunities that worked out for each of them. Was that ever a question or a challenge, especially when they were growing up, thinking about what that future would look like?
Well, our younger son, Brady, had always said he was leaving. So we never really even questioned that, Dustin said he's staying, Brady said he's going, and they both were happy with it. It wasn't until Brady was a sophomore in college and said, I want to come home. We were like, oh boy, what are we going to do now? Because the place really at that time still wasn't quite big enough to support, 4 of us again, not family wise. Mm-hmm. And so we were a little concerned. So when my dad's place became available, it was a godsend for all of us. And it's closer to town. We live 30 miles from the nearest town of 1,200 people. Now he lives 6 miles from that town where he works. He and his wife both work in town, and it's so much easier for them. We have a lot of gravel road, and it was hard for them to have to drive back and forth to work every day. And it just opened up pasture for us. It opened up a closer to town house for them, and a little distance for us didn't hurt either, honestly. So,
yeah. Well, that's really cool. With how things have developed over the years, what has your operation transformed into? Like, what are you guys focusing on right now?
Mostly, we're a split operation on calving. We have fall and we have spring, and we're more focused towards the spring calving. We're growing that herd more and more. We're just kind of maintaining the fall herd at this point. We're debating. We actually have just been in discussion. My oldest son, Dustin, loves to truck. We have the trucking company. It's an LLC that we have separately, and he drives truck almost full time. But we are needing him more and more on the ranch as we grow. And the trucking is not really paying, only running at half time. So we're debating whether the trucking needs to go by the wayside at this point or not, and just focus on the cow herd. The sheep, it hasn't grown a lot. We have been through kind of a health battle in the last couple of years with my husband, and a few things had to downsize. So the sheep are predominantly what I take care of. I mean, I take care of the cows too, but the guys don't like to work with the sheep. So I'm kind of on my own, just my dogs and I to do the sheep. And so while we were gone, Mike and I had to go to Rochester a lot for Mike's cancer treatments. And so we downsized the sheep a lot. I used to run 700 head of sheep, and I'm down to 100 right now. And Mike's good. Now everything's good. We're through treatments.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, he's good. Cancer free. Praise the Lord. So it's all good. It's just been a journey. And we really did get to see our sons in action in that. And that part was good. It was good for Mike to see that our boys could and would step up and take care of things. Because, we had to sell calves while we were gone, and the boys just had to handle it all.
I bet they felt pretty proud showing that they could do that too.
Very much. It was good for them.
Yeah.
Because the thing that I think shaped Mike and I so much is we were so young and we had no one else to fall back on. And our boys do have someone to fall back on, which is good. But it also has shaped them a little different than us. We're very strong-willed. We're very independent. And it's do or die. It always has been for us. And for them, it hasn't been. And so for them to have to step up and be like, we got to get this done was so good for them mentally.
Yeah. It's interesting trying to find a balance in raising kids, I think, of giving them that grit and work ethic, and also just making sure they have a good relationship with you as a parent. Like it's a hard balance to strike. If you've got tips for that, I'd love them.
I don't have a lot of great tips. I still am working it out. The thing that I always tell people all the time is the thing that I have done right for my children is I prayed over them every day. I have not always done a lot of things right. I mean, it would make me a little emotional to think about the things I've done wrong. But I've tried to instill independence in them from an early age. Um, try to be fearless, and I'm not always fearless, but I try to help them be fearless in things and go after things. And because I spoke that over them all the time when they were little. I mean, from the time they were little, I would say, I believe you can do this. I believe you can do this. I don't think there's anything they don't believe they can do. So, and our relationship is really pretty good, the boys and I. Sometimes Mike and them, because of adult boys, they butt heads a little, and that's to be expected. They get along great. And then something will happen, and, working cows, things get a little heated sometimes. And yeah.
Well, I think that's, I don't know of any father sons that don't have that happen every once in a while. Oh, well, that's pretty cool. I'm interested to hear, like, as you have recovered from this health battle that Mike has gone through, which, again, so glad that he's come out on the other side of that and you guys still have him around. Are you guys looking at sizing back up then, or where are your kind of future goals at with that?
Well, on the sheep, I don't know. Right now, we'll probably, but we got hit really bad by a hailstorm back in June of this year, and it literally looks like you took a weed eater to our pastures. Thank God it didn't hit any of our summer pastures over at our son's place, so we had somewhere to go for summer, but we have nothing here at home. And because of where we live and how we run, a lot of our ground, probably close to half of it is lease through the tribe. And so it's on an every 5-year basis. And it's always a little challenging because you never know in 5 years if you're still going to have it. You just go on faith. That's all you can do. You have to just plan that you're going to get it and roll with the punches if you don't. Mm-hmm. And so being able to adapt has been one of those things. So we'll continue. Mike, I was so proud of him this year because he said, when we thought we lost one lease, I said, well, are we going to keep replacement heifers this year? We don't even know where we're going with stuff next year. We'll end up selling half the herd if we don't get this something figured out. And why are we going to keep replacement heifers? He goes, we're going to keep them. We'll find lease. We'll get it. And we still don't have anything, but he just believes we will. And he's not fearful at all. And he's just like, we'll get it done. It's not a big deal. So the fact that he will just step out and keep stuff, even when I'm not always the bravest, helps me be braver. Yeah. Say, okay, if you say you got this, we got this.
What a good balance to have that where you can back each other up like that. And then when one of you's not brave, the other one can take the risk, make the decision or pull the cord for you. Does your business accept online payments, credit cards, or bank transfers? You're going to want to know about a tool called ThriveCart. I've been using this tool on my own website and on clients' websites for years and have been so happy with it. ThriveCart is a software tool you can use to design online checkouts with every option you can dream up. You can sell physical and digital products, connect to loads of other softwares you use for your website, accept payments, email marketing, and more. This is the most powerful tool that I use and the lowest cost one for my business. I recommend it for anyone who accepts online payments, who wants to increase their revenue or average order value on any type of product that you sell. In my show notes, you can find an affiliate link that I have for ThriveCart that gets you a great deal on a one-time payment, no subscription, and also allows me to earn affiliate income from this tool that I really enjoy and recommend. If you have any questions about how ThriveCart could work for your business, feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to chat with you about it. Now, back to the show. It sounds like with you being outside on the day-to-day all the time, you probably have figured out things from a efficiency perspective, just your day-to-day, how you go about things. What are some of the things that you've added over the years, or maybe you started out with them, that you're just like, oh my gosh, that was the best thing we ever did, was making this change?
Well, the best thing was keeping replacement heifers. I'll still say that over and over and over again because it's changed their coward. I'm not before, honestly. I grew up roping and rodeoing and doing all this, but I really had a lot of broken bones, and so has my husband. And things hurt more now at our age. And so the fact that you don't have to worry about a cow upending you all the time has changed the way we ranch. We're more relaxed. We're not always on guard, and it's made ranching more enjoyable. I mean, I think sometimes we joke, like when you're young, you like that wild thing. I mean, I don't know. Then you get older and you regret some of those wild things. So I think that was the biggest thing for us. The efficiency thing for me, I love my guys, but I work with all males. Like there are very few women I ever see. And men don't always multitask well. At least the men that I'm around, they don't multitask well. And I'm not saying multitasking is a good thing, because sometimes I get to multitasking so much. But I will think, okay, wait, if we needed a part in town, why don't we pick up this, this, and this so we don't have to make another trip to town in 3 days? And my guys never think about that. It just drives me. That's one of the things that drives me nuts. Like, it's 30 miles one way. We don't need to make multiple trips to town a week. It's just not necessary. And I don't like to go to town, so I just assume not. So,
yeah, a difference of strengths there that you can like bring on there. Well, cool. I think it's been really great to hear your story and how you guys have managed that as you are looking forward to continuing this transition with your oldest son. What are some of the things that you're kind of thinking about and planning for the future as that continues?
One of the discussions that we've had with Dustin, and I've just prepared him so that we said, you need to know this before you commit financially into this. This is because of where we live. It's always going to be a volatile situation on whether or not you get leases. You have to know if you can handle that. And 2, your dad is never going to retire. He's not. He will back off. That is our goal. You will step up more financially. He's already stepped up more workload wise. Mike will not retire. And we just know that he will slow down, but he's never leaving the ranch. And I said, I understand if you cannot deal with that. I completely understand. But if you're not happy being a partner till the day he dies, probably decide a different route. And he said, nope, I wouldn't have it any other way. So thankfully that has worked out really well. Now, as we can get Mike to maybe loosen up just a little more, because what happened during the cancer treatment, he had no choice. It was completely out of his control. And when he stepped back in, boy, did he step back in big. So there's been a little bit of resentment, I think, there, but they're working through it. They're both pretty good, and they're getting better about communicating. So, and I think it's hoping that I'm stepping back and not getting in the middle of it.
Figuring out who gets the final say on those decisions, I feel like, is one of the biggest volatile situations that kind of causes those blow ups or rifts. That's really cool that your son is willing to deal with a partnership that long. And it's really neat that you guys have already just established that that's the situation, because that unknown of what will happen, what's it going to look like, makes it even harder to figure out. Is that just you guys knew that from the get-go and felt good communicating it? Or was there ever a point where it was like, I don't want to tell him because then he might not want to be here?
Nope, we were good about communicating it. And I think a lot of it is we've watched some dynamics in Mike's family. Not, his uncles and different things. And that retirement did not do them well. And, we all decided, even Dustin said, I think the best thing for dad is to never retire. He doesn't have a hobby. Ranching is all he knows. And at some point, if he decides to, so be it. He said, but I don't want to be the one that causes him to go downhill because he retired. Even when he was going through chemo, he would still be out feeding. He would just step out and throw up and do whatever, but he just could not be out feeding. So if he was home, he'd
man. Wow.
So.
Wow. What a tough man. Okay. Well, that's been wonderful experience to share with listeners who are thinking about transitions, who are thinking about figuring out what that setup might look like. I want to hear more about some of the experiences that you share in your book as well. So tell me a little bit about that side of things.
So I love to write. I've loved to write since I was little. And thankfully, an 8th grade teacher really pushed me. She said, I see something special in you. Make sure you continue on. And so I have just wrote for myself for years. And then I decided I started writing a book with my dad. And that's the first one we put out. Ripples is that one. And it talks about, my dad has a really interesting story, actually. He grew up in the Ozarks. And my grandma and grandpa had 7 kids. But unfortunately, my grandpa was an alcoholic and a moonshiner, and he left them in a cabin with no food, no wood, no nothing, just took everything and left them. And they about starved to death, but the Mennonite church stepped in and helped them. And my grandma was a praying woman, and so that's why it's called Ripples, is her faith and her prayer has rippled down through generations now. And many of us are in ministry now. And because of that one seed that she started way back then, and she wouldn't give up. We come from a line of very tough, resilient people. And my dad is that way. And so he wrote some of his story in Ripples. And then I wrote things like learning to let go of your past and leave a new legacy for your family. You don't have to continue to bring all the past with you. Because both Mike and I have, our own pasts, and we didn't want to bring that into our children's lives. We wanted them to have something separate from what we grew up with. And so that was my first book. And then the second, and that one was hard to write. I'm going to be honest. It was a little challenging. It was emotional. I've been through some trauma in my life, and I wrote about it in the book, and it was hard, but it was also healing. And I have loved the feedback from it. People have talked about how much it has helped them heal, and that just feels really good. The second book was so much fun to write. I could write more of those all the time. That one's called Miracles in the Mundane. And it's just ranch stories, short stories. It's a collection of short stories. Pretty random, all over the place. But just talking about my life on the ranch. I bring my faith into it because there's really nothing I do in life that my faith doesn't come into play. And so, yeah, I wrote that. And the front cover of this, I love this, is my son, Dustin. And the story behind this is so funny. He had just bought this horse. He rode him. This is his second ride on this horse. He stopped to put a letdown in it because we're bringing yearling steers across. He jumped on that horse so fast, that horse bucked him off so hard. Oh, it looks so peaceful, doesn't it? It just is so peaceful. So that's why we chose it for this, is because ranching often looks so peaceful. But behind the scenes, there's a few buck-offs. So...
Oh my gosh. Well, those both sound like really good reads to pick up. Where can people find them if they would like to check those out?
The easiest place is laurahicks.org, because then it'll point you to all the different places. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book Locker, all of those. But laurahicks.org is the easiest way to connect with me, to find any of the books. I sell photos and prints from the ranch, and you can get them there too. So
cool. I think a lot of folks are multi-passionate that we end up talking to on the podcast. They have the very busy lifestyle of the farming and ranching, but then they always have another thing that they love to do. How do you juggle both? What's it been like trying to make time?
Seasons. I have seasons that are way harder. For me, we joke that from pretty much March till November, it's just go, 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 go. And then the winter, you kind of get into a rhythm. So I write way more in the winter. I do write a little bit in the spring when I'm lambing, because I don't know why during lambing I'm so inspired to write things, but I do it on talk to text on my phone. Mm-hmm. And then I just come in and put it on the computer later. But for a lot of times I just write when I have time, and I fit it into the cracks. Sometimes the hardest part for me writing anything, I used to blog a lot when that was a big thing, but Mike, would, especially before Dustin was here full time, would come in the house. I'd just get done feeding and think, okay, I've got a couple hours to write or whatever, sit down to write. And he'd come in and yell across the house, "Woman, I need your help. We got to doctor some sick calves." And you're like, oh, I just got started, but I've learned to adjust and roll with it and write when I can.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. I think that it's really special to be able to put some of those stories out into the world. It's obvious that you have a really unique story and a lot of really cool stories to share. I did want to circle back on lambing and the sheep, because we didn't talk as much about those. So this is a little out of place in the episode, but tell me more about when you added those. Was it out of necessity to diversify that income, or you just wanted to try it?
So I started training border collies in 1999, I believe it was. Got my first little dog, and I started him. I had just a handful of goats, but I wanted to get into sheepdog trialing. And everybody said, there's no way you're going to sheepdog trial without learning sheep first. Because I'd always been around cattle. There was no way I was going to. Sheep are so different than cattle. Like, I cannot explain it enough. And so I bought 100 head of ewes. Because why would you start small? 20 would have been smart, but I had 2 dogs at the time. and we had no sheep fence whatsoever, run on 3 strands of barbed wire. Like that was tough. I lived with the sheep 24/7 because it's all I could do to keep them in. But I got sheep to train dogs is what I got. And what happened is I got so busy in life. I trialed for years. I've traveled all over the country. I loved it. It was so good for me. It was when my kids were little and I had to fit it in. I'd make like 8 trials a year, but it was so good for me because I grew up traveling with my dad with embryo transfer. And so I liked it. And there was really no time for Mike or desire to travel. And this was a good way. And the boys, I homeschooled at the time. And so they just went with me. We took the camper and we dog trialed and it was glorious. I wouldn't have traded it. I don't do it as much anymore. As we have grown with the numbers of cattle and ranching, it has proven very challenging. I thought I'd have more time as the boys got older. It hasn't been the case at all. It's been less time. So then other things have come up, more writing. I'm doing some speaking things. And so just other things have come up and you have to kind of pick and choose how many days you're gone.
Sure. When you got started with those first 2 dogs, was that just on a whim? You wanted to learn it? What kind of resources did you have to figure that out?
Every time you ask a question, I'm like, oh my goodness. So I actually was team roping at the time. Mike and I were team roping at the time. And we figured out team roping was actually not very good for our marriage, not together. So I got a little dog given to me, actually, just a stray. And it was a little, I think she was 100% border collie. She sure acted like it. Well, I was using her to just bring steers and calves up the return alley. I'm like, wow, this dog is talented. And it just got me thinking. I trained horses for other people all through high school and right out of high school. And so the thought of training a dog just really piqued my interest. I wanted to see how that was. So I found a guy that trained dogs up north, up at Timber Lake. And he ended up being like another father to me, like just amazing, the relationship I had with him. And he taught me a lot about training in general, more than I had probably learned in a lot of other places. And so Pete Carmichael was his name, and he was amazing at helping me get going. And I don't know, it just was one of those things where the challenge, I love a challenge, and the challenge of training a dog was so different than training a horse. You have no physical contact. You're sending the dog on average, for a trial is 500 to 600 yards away from you. And they're only going either on voice or whistle. And so that was a pretty big challenge. Yeah. So I sold the first 2 dogs I had. I couldn't believe I did that. I still look back and those were, out of all the regrets I have, I can't believe I sold those dogs. I should not have sold those dogs. They were some of the best I ever trained.
Yeah. Oh man. I love hearing about stock dogs. I am fascinated by it. I've been to one clinic just to like kind of dip my toes, but I love the idea of doing that at some point in our story. So that's really cool story to hear how you got into it.
The partnership thing, really, you need to give it a go, because the partnership thing, I love a partnership with a horse, but the partnership with a dog is just pretty cool. Yeah. I've had dogs save my life, literally save it.
Well, it sounds like your son's life too from that story earlier. Yep. Pretty neat. Yep. Do you guys use a lot of dogs today then?
We still use dogs every day. Well, not every day, not like when we're feeding and stuff, but yeah, we use dogs all the time. I don't have as many as I used to because I would take in outside dogs and I was training and selling dogs and stuff, but we just have 3 right now, 4 between my son and I. So yeah, not a lot. And if I was trialing more, I'd want more, because if you're going to drive very far, you won't want to run more than 1 dog. On average, you run 3 to 4 dogs every trial. So. Yeah,
that makes sense. Cool. Well, you brought up one other thing I want to hit on, and that is that you were homeschooling your boys at the time that you were doing that. We've had several people on the podcast that have been homeschoolers or considering homeschooling, and it's a very common topic here because of, for one, the lifestyle and how it fits in, and for 2, just I think the opportunity to spend that time and leave that impression on our kids. So I'd love to hear more about what your journey with that was like.
Well, we were really blessed to have a little country school. When I say not very far away, it was 20 miles away. But I drove bus for it. So the kids went there for the first several years of school. And then they closed the country school. And we were pretty devastated and not sure what to do. They were going to make them go to town, and they would have had to be on the bus at 6:30 in the morning and wouldn't get home till 5 at night. And I just wasn't willing to give up that much time with my kids. And we spent a lot of time praying about it and thinking about it because I don't feel competent to be a teacher. I'm not a good student. I love to learn. Learning is like one of my passions. I'm just not always good at teaching that learning. And so I was scared to do it. But finally, Mike said, let's just try. Let's try 1 year and see where we go. And we really liked it. And the thing that I found out, and I don't mean to bash public schools. My daughter-in-law is a public school teacher, and I'm so grateful for her. But boy, there's a lot of wasted time in public school. Our boys could get through the necessary work in so much less time and then be on with their day. Our youngest is a very, very driven, educational wise kind of kid. And he's a lot like Mike, mathematics, science, fast. I couldn't keep up with him. And he would get done with all of his schoolwork because I would lay out lesson plans for him. I would help teach anything that needed taught, but pretty much they were allowed to work whatever schedule they wanted. He'd be done by 9:30 in the morning. Well, it didn't take long before he figured out that Dad was going to put him to work after that. He learned himself.
Yeah. I was going to say, how did you fill their time then when it does take so much less time? That's what we've thought about it for us. I've got 4 kids, which terrifies me. I'm like, I don't know how I would ever manage that. But filling their time after school is what terrifies me more. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much just time.
Well, ours were a little older, so I can't speak to young kids because they came back to homeschool. I got to think how old they were now. Well, like 4th, 5th grade, right in there. They were a little older. They already knew how to read, all that stuff. So that was easier. Also, from the time our kids could actually walk, they've been doing ranch work. They were driving cake pickups. They've been riding horses and moving cows since they could hold on to a horse. So when they weren't doing schoolwork, they were most of the time, they were allowed to free read if they wanted to. And they were allowed so much time to play. Like, you can just go play whatever. Cause I don't want them to all be ranch work, but they were also, by the time that age, they were good help. And so a lot of times it's like, well, they just planned on the afternoons was going to be ranch work. Mm-hmm. So the mornings was schoolwork and free reading, and they could play. We had I can't remember, one of the first like PlayStation things or whatever, and they were each allowed 30 minutes a day to play on it. Thankfully, they both outgrown it. I was kind of worried for a while, but they both outgrew that and prefer to be outside too. So, but I don't know. I don't know that that's the right way, but we also expected a little bit of, we held a schedule more than I think a lot of did because I knew we would go back to public school. In high school, I did not. There was no way I was going to teach, especially our youngest. I could not keep up with him. And so he had to go back to public school in high school. And so we kept a pretty, by 8, you're starting school and you're going to sit at the kitchen table and we're going to do this. And I didn't do a lot of computer stuff for them, like self-guided. We did stuff through books because I wanted them to have physical books. So everybody's different. And my sister taught hers a totally different way and it worked out just fine too. So
cool. Was it hard when they did transition back to public school for high school then?
The hardest part, actually, especially for our youngest, is he was so far ahead of where his grade level was. And they would not let him, especially, it frustrated me in math, they would not let him go ahead where he was, where he'd already gotten through. I said, well, test him and see if he's already got, when he went back to public school, he was actually a 7th grader. And they wouldn't let our kids play sports at the time if you homeschooled. And so we sent him back because they wanted to play football. And yeah, they wouldn't let him go ahead. So that part was hard. Socially, we were so active socially and other things, 4-H, rodeo, wrestling, and because they would let him do AAU wrestling. They had friends. That wasn't hard. Yeah.
I'm not really sure when you sleep after hearing all of the things that you guys have done.
It's probably why I'm dealing with some of my own health issues. I don't sleep very well. So.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and this experience. I love getting to share just what the day-to-day and the journey is like for other people, because it can, I think, give a good source of inspiration for things that we can tweak in our own stories. You mentioned towards the beginning that, we see that peaceful side of ranching and what it looks like from the outside, but behind the scenes, it can be kind of hard sometimes. For people who are maybe experiencing that or in the thick of it, what's a inspiration or positive thing you would encourage them to focus on or share?
Two things. First of all, faith. I'm always going to go back to that because prayer has gotten us through so much, so many times, like when we've lost leases and don't know which way to go when we pray. And we're very actively involved in our churches, and that has helped because it also is a community, and we're very isolated. Ranchers in general are, but we're rurally out in where we live are very rural. Our nearest neighbor's 5 miles away, and I love it. I wouldn't trade it, but the isolation can get to you a little bit too. And sometimes I find myself not knowing how to interact with other people, especially women. And so I'm glad that we have stayed connected in community, because once our kids got out of sports, we lost a lot of our community. And I've had to actively try to stay in community instead of become a hermit out here, because that's what I would naturally actually be drawn to. It's just, I'm happy with cows. I'm happy with horses and dogs. I'm just good to stay there. And to be able to stay in community though, and then see it, we have been blessed beyond words to see how community rallies. When Mike found out, they gave him 20% chance to live through the first year. It was devastating. They said, go home, your affairs in order. And then had to send us to Rochester right during like one of our busiest seasons. And the community not only rallied and did our work, they did fundraisers to help us not have to worry about the medical costs and the hotels to stay out there. And I mean, it's incredible. It was incredible. Yeah. Community is a big deal.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that bit of light. If folks want to connect with you or learn more about you, where can they do that at?
Sorry. LauraHicks.org is the best place. I'm on social media. I'm taking just a little tiny hiatus right now just for the Christmas season and kind of get refreshed and all that kind of stuff. But Facebook is Laura Hicks. Instagram is Laura_A_Hicks, which I need to probably change that so it's easier. But yeah, usually you'll find me with a cap that you'll know that's the right person if you find me with a cap.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Laura. I appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it. It was fun.
If you've enjoyed spending time with us today, please take a moment to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or join the conversation on social media. Do you have a topic you would like to discuss or know someone with a story to share? Apply to be a guest on the podcast at farmingonpurpose.com. You can follow the host of Farming on Purpose, Lexi, on your favorite social media platforms for more content by searching for Farming on Purpose. And remember, if you look around your table and aren't inspired by the people there, it's time to find a new seat.